to Arwen by Eddard Aedylan. More than UA in which Jon. Chapter 1. Jon has always been a loner, not really wanting to be in the company of others all the most that much. Reticent and broody little Jon. That's what people called him. He is a lot like his father in that regard, with his long and somber face, dark hair, and gray eyes. Then again, most of the Starks look that way, so it wasn't really just his father. Looks a lot like his Aunt Lyanna as well. Other times it was his Uncle Brandon or Uncle Benjen. He didn't know who he really did look like, but he wished that he looked like his mother. The mother that he never met. The mother who died giving birth to him. The fact that fact was always haunted Jon. He blamed himself for his mother's death and the perpetual look of grief on his father's face. He had felt the guilt for his birth ever since that day his father first brought him to the Godswood Cemetery to show him his late mother's grave and explain to him how she died. He doesn't really know anything about his mother's part apart from the things his father tells him, but he always wondered how she's really like. His father had told him once that his mother was the most beautiful woman he has ever met, and that she was kind and loving and fiercely loyal. Uncle Brandon was quick to second that part about her appearance. He had been too ardent in voicing his admirations. In fact, that it was borderline lascivious, as what his Aunt Lyanna once remarked. He didn't really understand what that word meant then, but he remembered his father's amused mine and the glare that he gives Uncle Brandon whenever he hears of his so-called Laris's praises. So Jon assumed that perhaps it meant something bad. How right he had been, he thought, the day he learned of the word's actual meaning. He didn't exactly appreciate his Uncle Brandon's rabbled comments about his dear departed mother, but he didn't hold it against him either. Brandon Stark is what one would call a shameless and unapologetic flirt, and so he dismissed his provocations to be merely harmless teasing. They called him the Wild Wolf for a reason. His father had kept pictures of her in a box, which he hid in the virtually decrepit and forgotten attic of Winterfell Manor, a rather pretentious name that their ancestors had deemed to call the Stark estate. On Jon's fifth birthday, however, after they had visited his father's grave, his father took him to the moisty and desolate part of the house and gave him that box. The moment he saw for her face a dusty and faded portrait of hers, at least Jon had to agree Mother was the most beautiful woman he's ever seen, with her sun-kissed skin and haunting deep blue eyes that looked as if they were almost glinting violet, and the black hair that fell in loose waves up to her waist. His mother truly was stunning. It's become his tradition to go to Godswood Cemetery every Saturday ever since he learned that their mother had been laid. His mother had been laid to rest in at the very place his father had accompanied him the first time on his fifth birthday, and then the next, still, until he stopped going altogether when Jon turned 8. Ned had told him that the first time that his mother slept in that place, it was also the first time that he somehow came to have a grasp of the concept of death, although initially, when his father told him that she slept there, he had not understood his meaning. He didn't understand why his mother would be in a place that was not their home. Robb and Sansa's mom, Aunt Catelyn, lives in Winterfell Manor with them, so why was his mother not? Why was she left in the Godswood Cemetery to sleep all by herself? It only confused him further when Ned pointed at a huge slab of raw stone with words and numbers engraved on it. Eddard Stark, for you were a falling star, one of a million in a vast sky that flared up for a brief moment, only disappeared into endless night forever. You will be missed, will be remembered. 1969 to 1995. Jon felt uneasy around the Godswood Cemetery. It was a bleak place that had a dreary air about it, and it was quite depressing to say the least. There she is, Jon, your mother. His father's low and placid voice sounded from behind him, breaking the silence. Jon can't help but think of how his father's voice fitted with the artillery of the place. That's just a huge stone of stone, he remarked, mutter of factly, his dark brows knitting. What I meant to say is that she lays there. That's her resting place. His father explained. How can she fit in there? And why would she rather sleep there? Doesn't she want to be with us? Those were the questions that ran through his head. He had been utterly confused then. He was just deciding on which question he'd choose to ask. First, to clear his naive and befuddled mind, when his father's voice broke his musings. Of course she wants to be with us, he answered, with a light voice. Apparently Jon had spoken those earlier thoughts out loud. She loves us both very much, his father went on saying. You especially, but she didn't really have a choice. The stranger took her and put her there. I'm sure that if she could, she would have stopped the stranger from doing so she could be with us, with you, with us. A moment of long silence hung in the air between them before Jon asked another question. Who's the stranger? Squinting from the light of the sun, he looked up at his father's face and awaited his answer. The stranger, he sighed. He is the one who takes people's lives when their time comes. Why would he do that? He prodded further. As what a child as young as he is wont to do. Ned found it quite endearing and amusing of his son to be this curious, although that is not to say that he would be equally appreciative of the insistent questions that he was uncertain was about to come. Jon is at that age where everything he encounters in Life are promptly followed by questions. By questions that almost always had Jon breaking out in a cold sweat. It's just that sometimes he doesn't know how to answer his son's questions aptly, and at the same time suitably for his age. Most parents would catch his meaning when he says that kids can oftentimes be extremely inquisitive to the point of making the adults feel uneasy. He answered, regardless of his drifting thoughts, because that's just the way things go, how things are supposed to be. Have you ever heard of the saying, Villain Margulis? Jon has never heard of it, of course, and he thought that the saying sounded rather peculiar. What? He asked, frowning. Of course, it means all men must die. Die? What does that mean? That word he's heard of before, but he isn't really sure what it meant. He just knows that it was something to be sad about. Die, dead, death. For some reason, even though he was certain, he was certain, he did sure that he didn't like those words, nor will he ever like them. It means you stop living. His father's voice interrupted his thoughts. You stop existing in this world. It means you can no longer be with the ones you love. Because that's just the way things go. How things are supposed to be. He repeated his father's previous words as a question. Yes, well, that's really sad and terrible. When whoever this stranger is, I think he's a big jerk. Jon's eyes widened and immediately slapped a hand over his mouth, realizing that he just uttered a very inappropriate word in front of his father. His father, however, immediately let out a short chuckle. Alright, I'll pretend I didn't hear that, but just this once. His father was lit up with a rare smile that upped his eyes, and he can't remember his expression. Grinning, Jon asked him, Dany, does that mean that we'd get to see Mommy again once the stranger took us to? In a firm yet gentle voice, he answered that I do not know. Jon surely will know it when it happens, but not today, nor the next day, because first we must live. He stared solemnly at the solemn face of his father, mulling over his words. Return. Before he returned his gaze to his mother's gravestone, one of the dates engraved under it caught his eye. That's my birthday. Why is my birthday written in the stone? He asked his father with a befuddled frown, pointing at the aforementioned stone. His father thought fully as he gently put his hand over his son's head and lighter for his curls. He slowly went down to his knees to be on an eye level with his son, gazing at him with somber eyes. Gray on gray, she died that day you were born, Jon. Jon's previous frown only deepened as he brutally tried to make sense of his father's word. She died giving birth to you, Jon. His father explained further in an unabated thought suddenly came to his mind. Then and before he could think back better of it, he voiced it. You mean I gave her life in exchange for mine? His father, he looked at his mother's life. He took his mother's life. He ruminated darkly. He is not supposed to think that way. He knew, but it was as if his contemplations are almost involuntary. They just come without him even wanting to. Her time had come to end, and yours had become to start. She wanted you to experience life as she once did. His father replied enviously. That wasn't the answer to my question, continued. Ned sighed, his starting to regret his decision in bringing Jon here and telling him of his mother's death. He's still too young. He suddenly only realized, but Jon has always seemed ahead of his age, so strangely mature that Ned sometimes forgets how young he truly is. Gods, he only just turned 5 today. He thought contritely he's too young to be burdened of such matters. But he knew he had to answer. Knowing Jon, he'd only feel worse if he was left with questions unanswered. He's already opened the can of worms, so might as well just get it over with. He couldn't lie to him either. Lies would only further complicate things. All he could do was to usage the weight of the truth. In a way, yes, I guess. You could say that. It was a sacrifice she made. So it was my fault then. I'm the reason why she can't no longer be with the one she loves and why she's sleeping all cramped up that piece of stone. What if she hates me for it? Do you You hate me for it, Daddy? Daddy? Jon blurted out excitedly, frantically. It was as if his words were engaged in a race with his emotions, as if his tears were fighting their way out ahead of his thoughts, and he was trying to chase them desperately. Jon wanted to cry then. It was all too much to take in his little young mind, knowing that his mother could be suffering, that she was all alone in this miserable place, and that he was the reason for it. He didn't completely understand, and yet he felt the normality of its meaning. He felt a great feel of pain. No, don't think that, Ned said quickly, shaking his head. She could never hate you. I could never hate you. We love you. It's no one's fault. It happened because it was meant to be that way. I suppose it's a rather kind of the gods. Don't you think? They took your mother from me, but they gave you as well. She isn't completely lost in the world because a part of her stayed. That's you. His father tried to mask his pain with another smile, and even then he still looked sad. Sad. Jon saw through it. He knew his father was only being placating for his sake, and it only made him feel even guiltier. He felt ashamed of himself. Now he's hurting his father too. His eyes stung. His throat felt dry. He wanted to run away and hide in a corner and just cry his heart out until he could no longer feel whatever it was he's feeling. He made a move to escape, but he the hand that his father had placed on his head now slid down to his little shoulder, and holding him there firmly in place. His father's voice cracked as he said, "I'm sorry, Jon. I shouldn't have told you. You weren't ready. I'm sorry. You're her and I love you, and so much." Before he knew it, he was engulfed in his father's warm embrace, and then just like that he let the tears flow, surrendering in his father's arms. He threw his little ones around his father's shoulders and burrowed his face deeper into the crook of his neck, sobbing hard while his father kept murmuring reassurances and apologies to his ear. Ned lifted him up and walked away from his mother's grave while rubbing soothing circles on his back. But Jon's still lingered over at his mother's gravestone while he rested, his still slightly trembling chin on his father's shoulder. His eyes spilling with tears, yet unwavering as they moved farther and farther away from his 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 mother rested, where his mother rested, and saddened him to think that she had no one with her. She's lonely. She's lonely, he thought, and so that day Jon made a promise to his mother that he will return, that he will never let her feel alone again.